In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. I am really looking forward to speaking with today's guest. She's a tech entrepreneur and philanthropist who spent 40 years in the IT industry. She started her career as a programmer and founded her company 24 years ago. She's transformed her company multiple times, notably from a value-added reseller into a leader in IT, and more recently, a deep focus and expertise in IoT. She also sits on the board of multiple organizations and enjoys mentoring young female entrepreneurs and other technologists. She and her firm have won numerous awards, including multiple CRN Triple Crown Awards, the IoT Innovators Award, and she was also named IoT Community's Woman of the Year, and that's just to name a few. She's the founder, CEO, and CTO of CBT. Please welcome Kelly Ireland to the show.
Thank you, Natalie, so much for having me on.
It's really great to have you, and I'm looking forward to the conversation, especially as I know that you've led through multiple transformations, and I'm sure we'll get into some of those different areas. I'd love to start with your more recent, as I know you have been on a journey over the last 8+ years to really focus on IoT. But before we dive into that, I'd love, for the benefit of our listeners, can you please, from a high level, share kind of where things are with IoT and maybe an example or two?
Sure. IoT is, like everybody said, kind of leading edge, new age stuff. What we've seen is, starting about 8 years ago, jumping into it, Internet of Things in a really simple approach is just people, items, connected, censored, providing data. Internet of Things, doesn't matter what that thing is. It could be all kinds of things. But it's gotten to where it's very complex because now you're talking about being in the center of manufacturing facilities, being out in farms, on land, in zoos. I mean, it applies in so many places. A lot of the stuff that we've focused on has been more for the worker, whether it be connecting a worker remotely, something that obviously was huge with COVID, down to mentoring, as well as guiding, as well as certifications and training, anything that a remote touch can help and assist. And I think the thing that really drove us with this is, one, it's fun. I mean, it's serious, but it is a lot more fun than just straight IT. And two, the amount of return on investment is so massive and so quick that it's really hard not to engage. And I'd say over the last 8 years, it was very slow to start. People did not want to even look at it without saying, well, let me see what somebody else does. It's always, let the other guy try it. And we've seen that pretty much over the last 4 years, 5 years. Just in the last year, we've seen people going, this is a thing. This is going to be important. We really have to start looking at it. And if I jump back just a few years, there was heavy innovation. You had what would you call them? CIOs, but Chief Innovation Officer. You had innovation departments. We saw that come pretty quickly and then go away. And we don't see that nearly as much as we do lines of business being focused on what makes the most sense for them in IoT.
Great. Thank you for that. And I know we'll get into some of those other areas, especially the use cases and the ROI. Yeah. But let's dive into your company's journey. So can you start us off at the beginning?
At the beginning of the company, we were 24 years ago. I had been in IT. I created CBT because I saw that there needed to be a change in how we serviced customers. I had been involved with large reseller companies. And I just felt they were losing their focus. Their focus was on profitability and not on serving a customer. And I had a customer, a very large, Fortune probably 10 customer that I felt was not receiving the services they needed to. And, uplifting, my team who is servicing them. It's all about the customer and it's all about bringing value. And so I opened up to give both my customers a different experience and my employees. So right from the get-go, just a different feeling. If you treat your employees well, they treat your customers well. That worked for us because we've had the same customer. Our one customer we opened the company with is still with us, 24 going into 25 years. You have to deliver value in order to do that. But I always say it's not rocket science. Take care of your customers, take care of your employees. They will take care of each other. We decided to specialize along the way. So stepped out of the norm and invested in high performance computing and the resources needed for that. Stepped out, actually created a custom portal for this customer that covered 40 foreign countries, currency exchange, trade block adjusters, etc. Made it simpler for them to buy throughout the world. And third, decided to get into this IoT journey, which by far is the most fun, the most exciting, the most value we can bring to customers. So that's kind of been the transition. And I think our big forte is we have focused on investing in the resources needed for these specializations, because that's one thing I have seen in marketing and go-to-market is there's a lot of people that say they can do it. There's very few that can. And, that's kind of our focus of making sure our message gets to our customers that we are an elite group that really knows what we're doing, have experienced it, have, taken customers on a journey. And I think that's a really important thing for your viewers to hear.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it can be hard to kind of set yourself apart in the IT services space. And I think it's one of those things where it can feel scary to double down in certain areas and feel like you're giving up kind of potential missed opportunities. But it really does make such a difference. I'm curious,
Absolutely.
was there a moment that that decision to double down on IoT? Was there a moment where you kind of made that strategic decision? Kind of what was the thinking behind it?
We're working on a project with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise focused on oil and gas. And in parallel, they had this IoT refinery of the future project going. And they ended up asking us to come over and assist with that. And we ended up coming over as the systems integrator because they had 24 companies, but they were all manufacturers and software companies. And each wanted to bring their own product, but no one was really brought in to integrate it together. And we had it at a facility. So it was a living lab and you could test all this stuff and put it together, which was something that was very needed in the time. No one really knew IoT very well. No one, the software companies were creating what they had. The hardware companies were creating what they had. Does it work all together? It didn't. It needed tweaks. It needed some fixes. It needed some updates. It just needed some, coexisting and learning and putting these things together and resolving the issues, which was a great practice to start out with. But, that's kind of how we jumped in and started learning this and started kind of falling in love with the value that it brings.
Yeah. Can you talk about some of the lessons that you've learned along the way? And maybe is there anything you'd do differently if you're starting that journey again?
Yeah, we learned an immense amount. I think the two most important is when you're providing something new. I mean, obviously, you need to know that you're capable of doing it. You need to know you have the right resources. But when it comes to go to market, you have to have a really clear understanding of the industry or the market segment that you're focusing on. Especially in IoT, because it is critical that you understand at least at a high level, the processes that they use, whether it's manufacturing or it's service delivery or transportation, whatever industry it is, you better have a good idea of what it is and get as specific of knowledge of a customer as you can. This isn't go spread it out there. You can do a blast to everybody, but I think it's really, really important that you understand a segment and probably approach segments separately with your marketing, because the marketing is, especially in IoT, it could be different. It could be very different depending on the industry you're focusing on, from construction, to utilities, all different kinds of things. And not that the solution doesn't work across all of them, but it certainly has to be tweaked to the needs of the customer. So that's one thing I'd say, is really clearly understand and be educated on the customer and on the industry. And I think secondly, something that kind of burned us a few times and then we learned is kind of two areas. Make sure IT is involved. There were so many times early on that you'd work with a customer and they didn't want IT involved. There was kind of a wave of time where everybody was like, IT doesn't give us what we want to leave them out. Well, that's fine until it comes to actual deployment, and then you have to depend on IT. So very quickly you have to engage IT. But the other thing you have to engage is procurement, because when it comes to IoT or other specialized solution that you're marketing to customers, there's a lot of effort there. And a lot of the time it's not billable. So as a supplier, it's your investment in this customer. Procurement doesn't care if they don't know. So making sure that you're registered with procurement, that you're in their system, that they're able to give you a PO, because all this work leads to a solution, and procurement's doing their job. They might take it, split it apart, and bid it out to the lowest bidder. That might be great for the shortfall of you may save, a lot of times it could be the same, but you might save a little bit of money because you go to your standard IT delivery company or supplier. But in the long run, it slows everything down, because then you don't have the expertise. Most of the larger suppliers that everybody goes to for IT do not have specializations, do not understand. They might say they do, but they don't have the inherent knowledge and experience of actually working with IoT products in most cases. And so they can deliver you the hardware and the software, but they can't support the services, do the integration, do all that kind of stuff, not in the same manner as companies like ours and others that are duly specialized and educated on how to do this.
Right, right. Which I would imagine previously you were working more directly or kind of exclusively with IT. So it's interesting that then in IoT, you look at those business function leaders, but then realizing kind of the importance of bringing IT in early.
Yep. Absolutely.
I want to come back to something you said kind of on the first lesson learned around having that clear understanding of the market and for the go-to-market and the customer. Curious first, did you have to make any choices within providing kind of IoT solutions, any specific industries that you were planning to double down on?
Have about 5 that we've focused on, just because of we're very focused on what's called connected worker. So it could be remote connection, it could be training, delivery of training, guidance by an expert, but it's things around worker guidance, mentoring, and safety and security. So it can also bring in things about, the environment they're in. So if you look at more dangerous environments, manufacturing, oil and gas, chemical, those kind of places where it could do a twofold solution. It can provide access to remote training, to remote guidance, but it also can track GPS, biofeedback, biometrics, et cetera. It can provide all kinds of stuff of, situational awareness, unsafe areas around it. I mean, we put a device in a nuclear power plant. It took us about 30 days working with their IT security department to show that it truly has the security levels it needs. intrinsically within the device to get it in there. We got it in there, but it was great because it had a decimeter reader that was engaged, integrated into it, so it could actually tell, the worker at this, plant, if they're walking into an area that has, that could be harmful. And it's not just a buzz or a beep or a pager. It's actually a thing that could show them this is the level you're at as you walk. It's going higher. You need to turn around and leave. You can do directions to them leave. So a lot of really cool worker concentrated issues. And so those are the industries, the ones where you really have to look after the worker. You have to be, cognizant of where they're at. And or it's extremely important that you have a massive approach to training and guidance remotely.
Yeah. And how did those focus areas drive your sales and marketing efforts?
It's pretty simple. We used to attend much broader conferences and, have our booth and focus. What we learned is by picking out the segments that we wanted to go after and then going to specialized conferences within those industries was much better return on investment. We got to focus directly with either the end users or the managers of lines of business that were looking for these exact solutions. So you kind of cut out a lot of the middleman. You cut out all having to snake around, where's the right person I need to get to. And I think it's really helped that the lines of business are the ones that are focusing on IoT. It's not an overarching IT program. It's more of line of business. So you get to get right with those people. And what we've always found is it's super, super important. Whenever you're doing a solution, make sure the end users, the ultimate end users, are involved up front. Because what we saw, a decade ago, 2 decades ago, is IT would deliver a solution. But in a lot of cases, they were just told, create this and deliver it. Well, there wasn't as much integration of people that were actually going to use the technology. With IoT, it is imperative that, key frontline workers, end users are involved from the beginning. You get their feedback because not only do you end up getting really valuable feedback, but what you get is engagement. And you start from the beginning with having them maybe not understand it. We have ones that go, it's going to take my job. It's going to take my friend's job. You're going to reduce staff. And by the time we got done deploying it, they're like, that had nothing to do with it. You care about my knowledge. You care about my safety. You care about me being able to safely do my job. Completely turned this one guy around. And then he went out and trained everybody that was on his staff without even being asked. He was so excited about it. So I think that's the really critical stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I think is, the point that you're making around kind of follow the customer, know the customer, both for what you just talked about in that kind of sales process and deployment cycle. But then the point you made about the conferences, right? If you're completely horizontal, especially if you're a small or mid-sized company, it's so easy to spread your efforts too thin, dilute your message, have a hard time standing out. So by doing what you did in those industry-focused conferences, and presumably you're benefiting from that word of mouth and you have a more compelling message, and all of those components sound like they've really helped you and push the business forward in that way.
Yeah. And Natalie, I think the really important part too is the smaller conference, you don't have the gigantic suppliers there in many cases. Sometimes you do, but sometimes you don't, because some of the struggle is you have customers come up and they're like, you're a small company. How could you possibly, be more knowledgeable than this company that's $8 billion a year and, has 10,000 employees? Well, you'd be surprised. It's when you are small and you are focused and you really can dig deep into a single solution and not have to deliver the world to your customer, it does allow you to become, very, very knowledgeable and very educated and very capable of delivering complex solutions.
Right. And I think sometimes those smaller kind of more focused conferences, you get just higher quality conversations, whether you have a booth or kind of other participation. People that are attending for the right reasons. You might get more of the practitioners. I think there's a place for the big industry conference, but to some degree you go because everyone's going and you need to be there. But the quality of the sales conversation can be having, I find to be different.
Yeah. We found a lot of success with, we showcase our OEMs and ISVs, so manufacturers and software vendors, really understand our capabilities. And there's many times with the bigger conferences, they'll ask us to join them in their booth. If you can have that happen with your company, that is always great, because that really solidifies with a potential customer that if this large company manufacturer has you in their booth, then they believe that you are capable of delivering their solution.
Yes, yes, for sure. We recommend that a lot whenever possible. So that's wonderful. And I'd love to take a step back and really like talking about this change, and with you at the helm of your organization through this, would love to talk a little bit about your leadership approach, your leadership style, and I guess any specifics to leading through change. How do you work with your team?
Yeah. So I've answered this several times before. So some people, if you've heard me in other interviews, you're going to hear the same thing. I was one of 7 children, all born in 10 years. So we were all very close. And my father was a college coach and my mom was team mom. And I ended up having 50 brothers every year because my dad had a football team. And his recruiting included, because we were in Las Vegas, his recruiting included the fact that mothers did not want their sons going to college in Las Vegas. So he had to, act like he was their dad. So it was this broad family. Well, what it taught me from the very beginning is it's all about team. My dad was very good at not only coaching, his players, but kind of coaching his family of how you accomplish things and working as a team. And I remember one day him telling me, Kelly, the one thing never to do is don't put a superstar on your team that thinks just about themselves, because that is the thing that will disrupt and destroy a team quicker than anything. So that was something I kind of held in the back of my head, because I can tell you through 40 years of IT, I've seen so many times when, companies brought in a superstar and the superstar was not a superstar and just wreaked havoc and caused problems. Because, when you raise somebody up and say, look at the best ever, and then you kind of look at everybody else and everybody else feels like, well, I'm doing a good job. It's like, so kind of watching this whole, it's all about the team. It's all about functioning together. It's all about having common goals. It's all about having those conversations. Because that's the other thing. When we look at marketing, my sister had a marketing company and wrote a book. And it was Rise of the DEO and a design executive. And it was all about change. And it was all about who do you bring in? Who do you listen to? Who do you talk to? Who do you have involved? And when I read the book, I highlighted all of it. And then I called my sister and said, nature or nurture? Which was it? Because I run my company 90% of the way that this is presented in her book. And the funny thing was, it really came down to, it's all about a team. And it's all about not being so specific on these are the only good players. There's outliers that can bring really good information. And especially when it comes to marketing, there's some examples where they brought a janitor in, somebody else brought, some, housekeeper, somebody brought a policeman. I mean, they brought all kinds of different people in to contribute to get their feedback. And they found that the information they got from, kind of these outsiders was incredible. It was fresh and clear and wasn't encumbered by what they, would have learned if they had been sitting there working in a solution. And it just provided some really good insights.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's a good reminder that everyone has their own perspectives, both based on their career, their lives, their individual personalities, which is why having that diversity on the team is also helpful, that you're getting people from different backgrounds, different experiences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I also, your point about the no superstars, I think, is an important one. It's a very fine line between the superstar and kind of very easy for it to turn toxic. I think it's more the humble superstars who don't think that they're superstars to begin with, that really the kind of value that you can bring in those kinds of roles.
Yeah, and I think you can look at real life today, and especially sports, because I kind of connect everything to sports and team. But look at Steph Curry. I mean, look at different NBA players that are selfless. Yeah, they're superstars, but they embrace everybody else. And, there's all kinds of players that hand off to others and do things that you sit back and go, well, you could have made that shot, but you wanted to make sure that shot went. So you got it to the person that was in a better position. That's the kind of thing. You can have superstars, but have superstars that believe in team, that really believe in team and are willing to, lift others up. I think that's, really key.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious if there's any changes to what you look for in kind of a good employee or team member, if that's changed either based on the evolution of your business or just the kind of business landscape today versus years past.
I think the thing that we've focused on and been mostly successful with is my team. I've had a lot of people for a long time. There's been people that have been on my team since I opened my doors. And what we did early on is they were all really hard workers. They were all really focused on the company. Since I was good to them, they were good to me. They were good to my customers or our customers. And what we found is when we were looking for somebody, the first thing we did is went to our employees and said, this is the position. I mean, they could apply for it if they were qualified, or they could recommend people. And what we found is the people they recommended always ended up being really good because they wanted somebody that worked as hard as they did. They wanted somebody that would focus on uplifting the company and being successful. And I found out later that there were a couple people that joined the company that people did not like their work ethics. I didn't even have to do anything. They kind of took it upon themselves and were like, hey, this is how we work here. They kind of did the training on their own, which was interesting. But I think looking internally for people who can recruit others is our first go-to. And then after that, it's really, it's kind of a crapshoot. You definitely want references if you can get them. You definitely want to talk to people if you possibly can. You want to have some way of knowing what they did before, because we might be more unique in our approach and we want to find people that want to do it that way. So I think it's just, make sure you look at that, but look internally first, then look externally, and then make sure you do a good job of vetting.
Yeah, very good advice. I'd love to ask you a little bit about kind of things you're working on currently. Is there something that you're focused on at the moment that you're excited and passionate about?
Our IoT solutions, I think, are absolutely that we're so passionate about them. And like I said, it's all about being able to deliver such value to a customer. But our bigger passion, my bigger passion, like you said, is all about young women in tech, young boys in tech, bringing those people into tech and having them really get a taste of it. And I've focused on a lot of areas. I've been on a lot of, within a lot of organizations of how to deliver this, to elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, how to start training these kids to love technology. And the thing is that helping them understand they don't have to go to college. They don't have to go to college to actually get a very good job, that they can go into, start being productive, start learning more, and actually down the road when they really figure out what they want to be passionate about is maybe go back to college, maybe go back and get that degree, become an engineer, become something different, within that, or, completely change what you're doing. But I think we do a disservice to a lot of kids in making them feel like you have to do college. I never did college. Well, I did college, but I never finished college. I went in, I dabbled in some subjects and things, but my heart was in tech. And there wasn't a lot of tech back when I was in college. So it was like I had to go find that passion myself and go, to programming school and be able to program an IBM system that, was huge back then for what it produced. But I think that's really my passion. And, I'm not that far from retirement. And when I do, that's where my focus will still be to promote getting these kids some experience, especially in high school. We had a program at one point that was certifying high school kids to be Cisco engineers. They were actually certified. It was a great program that unfortunately COVID killed because they couldn't get the funding and the schools were out. But for a long time, ended up by 12th grade, you graduate and you're Cisco certified. I mean, what a great thing. You could step into a job getting you $70,000, $80,000 a year as a 19-year-old or 18-year-old, help you get started in life, and then help you decide if you wanted to go deeper or just stay within that and specialize out.
Yeah, it's seen a number of those programs. My husband's at a big tech company, and they had a hard time with, getting enough good entry-level talent, and so they did get involved in one of those programs, and it's become such a win-win. And people that maybe never thought they would become like white-collar professionals have, gone on to build these amazing careers for themselves. And I do think the dynamic is changing with college starting to get disrupted. I think it's a slow process, but I like your point about you can still always go back and go to college, but having that career experience and understanding of what do you like, what kind of aptitude do you have. I think high schools, I feel, don't always do the best job of helping kids think about not just what are you good at, but what kind of career suits you, right? There's the lifestyle component. You like traveling? Do you like sitting at a desk all day? Making that connection not only between what are you good at school and therefore kind of what career should you have, but kind of bringing in that broader perspective that's hard for kids to know until they've had that hands-on experience.
Until they've had that hands-on. I think of myself, I didn't open my company till after 40. And I was kind of like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm not sure what I want to do. Well, I was driven to what I really needed to do. But you struggle. You don't know exactly what you want to do. And so many people go through college and then completely pivot away from what they went and studied. So this is just, I think, a really good thing. When I grew up in Vegas, they had a lot of kids that went to Vo-Tech. Vo-Tech was supposedly the trouble school. That's where you sent the trouble kids, and they learned HVAC, and they learned electrical, and they learned all this other, trades. And you'd be amazed at how many of them are the most successful people in Las Vegas because they learned that trade. They didn't have to go to college. They were treated as if they, weren't smart enough for high school or couldn't behave well enough. And they ended up being, just the key people in Vegas that have done amazing jobs.
Yeah. I'm interested, I've had a few discussions with other parents lately about, what are the skill sets of the future and how to kind of help prepare your kids for that, especially thinking about tech and how much is changing. And should you still study coding given kind of where AI is headed and things like that? Are there any things that you're kind of thinking about or advise in that regard?
AI is going to definitely be disruptive, but I am one of those that we need to tread very carefully. I've already seen some of the stuff that AI can do that's not positive. It's very negative. How are we going to control it? How are we going to educate people on what AI brings? Early on, I had a friend that told me ChatGPT was the greatest thing ever. And then I started asking her questions and kind of leading her down a path of, do you believe everything you read on the internet? Blah, blah, blah. Just saying ChatGPT might be wonderful, but don't, you need to double check because maybe what it produced was a lie. You don't know. It doesn't have a brain. It can't decipher that. Can they eventually get it there? I'm sure down the road they can. But I think we have to be really careful about how we approach and what these kids are taught. They should be taught AI. They should, there still will be programming for a long time. There's still going to be a need for programming because AI is not perfect, nor will it be perfect for any time that I can see. But it can be very damaging. So I think we have to be make sure your kids are very educated, make sure they understand the shortcomings of AI. They can certainly focus on programming, any of the industries we have right now. Will AI disrupt that and change jobs? Absolutely. But I think it's more just keep yourself updated on educating. I think it'll be really interesting over the next year to see how and if it's regulated, which I hope it is. But how do you do that? That's a tough one too. So I would say keep going down the path. Just watch what's happening in the industry. I think with wearables and the things that you see in Internet of Things, that's pretty simple. At least understanding the concept, because it's like your smartphone. I mean, it's like your smartphone that gets attached to your wrist or to your armband or to your head or whatever. It's just, in a different place and gathers different censored information. But just having an understanding of a smartphone gets you, more than halfway there. So just being open to accepting and being open to new things, because you're going to see things and go, what is that? And why is that? And I think the more you dig into it, see it, and really experience it, what we've seen is the people that we've brought in and explained to them what IoT is, put it on them, let them experience it, their brains just start going crazy. They start coming up with use cases without us even prompting them. It's just the experience of putting it on, understanding what it can do, and what it censors, what kind of data comes out of it, what kind of data can go in it. And you will find that the customers end up just with a plethora of use cases. You kind of try to get them to focus on one, but then they go out from there. So
Yeah.
we'll get back to your thing of just be comfortable, but learn the technology, learn everything that gets integrated into it so that you feel comfortable. And then it'll allow you to be as passionate about it and, be able to provide that passion to the customer to understand what it brings.
Right. Well, and we're talking about kind of the workforce of the future, but I think that lesson is just as important for
Yep.
all of us as leaders, as professionals today, is the technology around us is changing so fast, and there's
Yeah.
big convergence between what we can get exposed to as a consumer and what we can use on the business side. And I think it can feel a little overwhelming for any individual to try to keep up with everything, or easier to say, like, I've got what I need. I don't need to kind of try the latest gadget. But I love the point that you made about kind of getting that exposure, and then all of a sudden, like, new innovative use cases come up, like light bulbs go off,
Yeah.
and everyone's going to have different moments like that.
Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is the people that we put this product on, they're not IT. Some of them aren't even lines of business. We've had groups of diversity representatives from large Fortune 500 companies, and they even put this technology on and go, minute. And they just start blurting off, different ideas. And we're like, yeah, that's exactly what it can do. So it doesn't even have to be a person that's in the line of business or that's in tech. It can be somebody outside of that, which is, as you can imagine, Natalie, is so much fun to watch.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. Sure. Is there any example that stands out to you of something that kind of someone brought up when they were having that experience?
We had somebody from the MGM, and she was diversity representative. And she put it on and she sat there and we thought, oh, what is she going to relate this to? And she goes, Callie, water management at the hotels. It's a big process. There's all the guys could wear this and blah, blah, blah. And we just kind of sat there like, wow, you are really engaged with, the processes around your entire facility. These are massive facilities that they have. And for her to just instantly click and go water management, and she took it back. We went back from this tour, went back to the main conference, and her boss was there and she talked about it. We put it on his head, and the two of them just went into this full conversation about how this solution could work with the water plant and the water plant management and blah, blah, blah. And we're just like, wow, that's crazy. And then we had another guy that put it on that we trained for a specific use case. And within the next 4 weeks, he came back with 7 more use cases. And he would bring it back and say, here's a process I have to do within my job. I was thinking I could do this. And we were like, You absolutely can. Let's document out what the process is, get the workflow in. But it just spurs that imagination, unlike anything I've ever seen before.
Mhm. Yeah, that aligns with like internally in my organization when talking about ChatGPT earlier, when it first rolled out and just getting all the generative AI wave and how much that's impacted kind of work that we do in marketing. Just feeling how important it was for everyone to kind of have that comfort level from the start and to be using it. And I think now that we're kind of putting our foot on the gas pedal even further is knowing that the ideas shouldn't come top down. Sure, we need our vision, we need our strategy and our kind of North Star, but really it's the users and different people in different roles are going to be the ones that are really looking at those innovative use cases.
And that's why it's critical that the frontline worker is involved, because they are going to bring so much value to it. And it's actually going to make it 10 times more successful than if it's just pushed down on them. Acceptance is going to be better. Usage is going to be much better.
Right. Well, that's great. Kelly, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. You talked a little bit about your childhood and your parents' impact on you. Would love to hear kind of a bit more and maybe like how you said you've been interested in tech since you were a child. Like, do you remember your first exposure or interest there?
I was always a science math girl in high school. So I was just drawn to math and I was drawn to science. And I actually wanted to be a doctor. I figured I want to be a doctor. And that's until I figured out how long you have to go to school. And I was very active and had a huge family. And it was just like, this is not going to measure out. I won't see my family, and I have a very close family. And I love outdoors and sports and stuff. So I thought, I'm going to have to find something that's a little different. And I was working right out of high school, working at a gas distributor in Las Vegas, and they had a computer there. And I would watch the programmer when he came in and started doing stuff. And he started seeing me look over his shoulder. So he's like, "Are you interested in this?" And I go, "I think so." And so he started training me. He started showing me, he started giving me little jobs to do. He asked them if it was okay if he used me to write up some programs and stuff. And he started training me and I fell in love with it. So they ended up sending me off to IBM RPG 2 and 3 programming school. And then I started picking up C++ and some others and, just dabbling. And it was, I think, the creative side of it. It brought in the math, kind of the math science side that kind of pulled, but it also brought in creativity because I started writing programs for myself just to see what it could do and what it could bring up. And it was just, I think it's that, insatiable appetite for creation and what can you do and how can you change the world. And so that's what I really focused on and just started taking tech jobs. I was very shy when I was younger, so never did I think I'd get into sales, but somehow I got pulled into sales in tech. And then I ended up loving that too, because I got to get with some great customers that truly valued, the value we could bring, and we could develop relationships. And I think that was the fun part too, is just being able to have those relationships, but still being able to be in tech. And I think pivoting the company into more specialization was just a continuation of that creativity that I had in me that said, I want to get more specialized. I don't want to just do the norm, IT. I want to get something that's a little more intriguing and that, maybe a little harder to understand and little more, you feel like you've achieved something by doing something that's out of the ordinary and really more specialized. So I think that was kind of my journey is, I learned all about team there, but then I started learning about what tech could do and how specialized tech could really contribute to customers and their goals and their bottom line. And I think that's what really got me to focus in those areas.
Yeah. I love that. And then, thinking about, all of the knowledge and leadership expertise that you've amassed over the years, if you think back to your first ever leadership role, what advice would you give your former self?
I thought about this. I'm going to say broaden your mind, because when I started my company, I was kind of, well, I had an aerospace customer and 9/11 happened 3 months later. So it was dramatic. There was a lot of drama. But I think it was, I kind of put the blinders up and we moved forward and we started doing stuff. And I would say, broaden your mind, make sure that your ecosystem, and that could be your complete delivery ecosystem, so hardware, software, different partners, but your internal ecosystem of the workers you have, but even counselors, your board, anything, make sure that you're broad enough. Make sure that you provide people who have experience, and not always, I've brought in people that had experience, but it was different and, it didn't mesh with what we were doing. And lessons learned there of the different things. You always pick up something, and it's always advantageous to get those different experiences and those different inputs from people. But I think make sure you do it broadly enough that, it brings value, but it also helps you to understand, different paths to go down and different paths not to go down.
Very good advice. And so as we wrap up today's conversation, can you let listeners know how they can reach you if they want to get in touch?
Absolutely. Kelly Ireland, so it's Kelly, Kelly .Ireland at cbtechinc.com. So cbtechinc.com.
Great. Thank you.
Love to talk to anybody.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you for all your insights.
Absolutely. Thank you, Natalie.
And thank you also to everybody that's listening. I know I loved hearing about so much of what Kelly and I discussed. And so if today gave you, our listeners, any valuable insights, and I'm sure that it did, please share this episode with someone. We know that spreading this kind of knowledge and information helps all of us grow as leaders and helps us drive successful innovation and transformation in our organizations. So thanks again, Kelly. And this has been another amazing discussion on Shift and Thrive. See you all next time. That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.